the Lord of heaven and earth, not just my corner of it, not just those parts of it that make sense to me, but even those parts to me that are a mystery. All of it. You know, we've read the story, but sometimes the story needs a poet. Sometimes the bare facts don't convey what the story is meant to tell. That's why we sing songs. Our poets are the ones that are on the platform. They're the ones stringing together words and melodies that somehow speak to us in ways that just words can't. Sometimes a story needs a poet. And sometimes I preach sermons that are for me before they're for you. And today is one of those days. I always try to craft sermons that speak to me first. Because what good is a preacher who is above his own words? But today, it's different even in its flow. Very occasionally, that right hemisphere of my brain takes over, that artsy part, and makes me do things that make other people's eyes roll. Today is one of those sermons. Welcome to the show of what I need. My prayer for you today is that it's what you need as well. So we come to this. Sometimes the story just needs a poet. It's when the things that need said are bigger than the naked facts of the story itself. You need a poet. Like when we speak about falling in love. Right? The bare facts tell us that our brains release opiates that are feel-good medicine to our system. And they flood our system, providing a vehicle for our physiological need to reproduce. That's the bare facts. Is that love? God forbid. You see, those are the facts, but love needs a poet. Or maybe when the mechanics of how something happened do not adequately convey the reality, the miracle that it happened. Then you need a poet. Like when we disassemble that classic car and all of its pieces are set on our garage floor. We can look and we can explain internal combustion, RPMs, horsepower, fuel systems, and transmissions. That's the mechanics of it. But when it's all put together, when all of the pieces are in the right place, when the whole of what is created is greater than the sum of its parts, well, you need a poet. And when we sit on that line, clutch in, car lurching forward, just waiting for the green light, looking for the cops, how it all works, the mechanics of it, comes together in the poetry of that deep growl that explodes in speed and adrenaline. You need a poet. I was never quite able to make my Geo Metro do that. So we come to Genesis. And we have profaned this book by treating it as mere facts and pure mechanics. Genesis needs a poet. We have perversed the Word of God when we have taken His Word and used it as weaponry designed to destroy those who disagree with us, those who differ in our belief. When we have read the book of Genesis as nothing more than a history of what has happened, we are doing nothing more than disassembling the creation that God has made that is greater than the sum of its parts. In fact, when we read those first words in Genesis, like a crime scene investigator, looking for the bare facts in the proof text to validate our positions, we have lost the soul of what the writer intends. It needs a poet. It is a poem, in fact. You see, this is poetry. It is truth that is greater than mere facts. It is the song that is more than just notes on a page. It is not words. It is not a user's manual. It is not a textbook for creation. It's poetry. Oh, that we would get this and our hearts would beat once more to the rhythm of the truth more than the bare facts. You see, it's meant to be felt. It's meant to be felt in that moment of nothingness when God says, "Let there be." In the beginning, God. That's poetry. Is this intended for the scientist? Well, yeah, I guess so, but no more so than it's intended for the rest of us. It's not intended, though, to be a book of science. When you make the text do that, you are missing the point. In the same way that you can explain the biology of love and the miracle of intimate union between a husband and wife, it quickly becomes hollowed out when we ignore the voice of a poet. Love needs a poet. Creation needs a poet. Can we hear some of the voices of our poets? How about the bard, the English bard? "But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east and Juliet." Oh, no. Let's make it sappy. "It is the east and Dana is the sun." Oh, there we go. "Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, which is already sick and pale with grief, that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she." You see what I just did? I just made myself a great week. Sometimes we need a poet. Or maybe when life has those dark, deep, melancholy moments and we don't know how to express the angst of what we're in, maybe we need the voice of people like Edgar Allan Poe. "Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary, o'er many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten yore, while I pondered, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. 'Tis some visitor," I muttered, entreating entrance at my chamber door, only this, nothing more. Do you hear the opiate-addled frenzy that sometimes our life brings us to? Sometimes we need a poet. Or when you don't know which way to go, do I go right, do I go left, do I go forward, or do I go backwards? Maybe we need the voice of Robert Frost that reminds us that when he came to a path in the wood, that he took the path less traveled by, and that has made all of the difference. We need a poet, or maybe even when we're facing the finality of death, we need the somber reflections of people like Emily Dickinson. "I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness round the room was like the stillness in the storm between the heaves of wind." We need a poet. Maybe when life threatens to crush you, you need the voice of Maya Angelou, reminding us to leave behind the nights of terror and fear. She says, "I rise into the daybreak that's wondrously clear. I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream, the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise." Or maybe when it seems like politics are going to consume us, eat us alive, we need the voices of poets like Amanda Gorman who say we will rebuild and reconcile and recover, and every known nook of our nation and every corner called our country, our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. We need a poet. We need the poet. So here again, those words that shape us. Maybe it is good that we hear it in the poetry of what it is intended. Can I indulge myself by reading backwards in an ancient book? Here's the words. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamim ve'et ha'eretz. There's poetry in the beginning. God created the heavens and the earth. Don't profane these words by making them less than what they are. Hear them in your soul in the beginning. But what of beginnings? What does this even mean? What was the beginning of which we speak? How can we speak of beginnings when there is no time? Beginning seems to be a pointless point of beginning. To say that God created everything seems to miss the wonder of there being anything at all. We breeze by these words and we shrug our shoulders, never looking around at the everything in front of us. God spoke and everything is. It just is. So that really is the fundamental question is why is there anything rather than nothing? It is the vexing question of philosophy, and ever since humanity has took its breath and recognized its place in the cosmos, this question has been nagging at our mind. Why is there something rather than nothing? You see, the laws of the cosmos do not answer that question. The heavens do not tell you why you exist, only that you do. We don't look to the stars to answer the why. That's futility. Instead, this creation, these stars, they only force us to stand in awestruck, awesome wonder at the reality that there is anything at all. Did you know that the force of gravity that dictates the laws of our universe, if it was just a tiny bit, the smallest minuscule bit stronger, that the weight of the universe itself would collapse in on itself in an eternal annihilation? Just a tiny bit stronger. Or on the opposite end, if it was just the smallest fraction lighter, there would be no planets, solar system, galaxies, atom by atom. The whole cosmos would fly apart, separated atom from atom by an infinity of space between them. Do you see? We live on the edge of impossibility. We live on the edge of nothingness. Nothingness is the edge upon which we teeter. In fact, most scientific models today show, interestingly enough, a cosmic equation. I don't know how this can be measured, so I'm a parrot today repeating things that I do not understand. But here's how this equation works. If you take, cosmically speaking, if you take the sum total of matter as a positive integer, and you put it against how gravity is represented as a negative integer, you know what the sum total of the universe is? 0. In a sense, the cosmos is nothing. I know that's very abstract, and I told you this is a right brain exercise for me. But that abstractness speaks something into our life. This mathematical nothingness into which we live, this apparent nothingness, into this void, there is a voice that speaks. And it is. It just is. Nothingness may be how we arrive at the sum total of the universe, but what holds it all together is that eternal voice. And with every word that this voice says, this voice that gives substance to nothing, light to darkness, meaning to meaninglessness, it declares with equal strength that it is good. Oh, it is good. Everything flows from the goodness that God is. God is good. When God saw all that He had made, He said, it is very good. If we will dare, maybe with a poet's heart, to look into the void of the uncreated world and to see God, then the first thing we will see when we finally begin to look around us at everything that is created is the goodness of all that is. God's first word into the void of nothingness is God's own goodness. It is the goodness of God that holds it all together. Today, more than ever, it seems we need to see goodness. We've stopped seeing goodness. So maybe we need to look around with redeemed eyes. I saw it just this week. I went out to check on my hens. I'm not talking about my wife and daughters. Whatever good week I was going to have, that just went away. I went out to check on my hens, who sadly are now roosterless, because that rooster is headless. But the rooster did his job. And I've told you, it's been so much fun for me. I grew up on a farm, but watching this hen brood on her nest, using that same word that is used when the Holy Spirit is hovering over the surface of the deep, brooding, to see her brood over her nest for those 3 weeks, to see those faces pop out, to see the way that she took care of them. I go out every day. I go out multiple times a day, and we talk. My hens and me, we talk. I have 2 flocks. That flock gives me no problems, because if they do, I butcher them. But I've watched them. I've watched them hatch. I've watched Mama take care of her hatchlings. And now as they grow, I've watched her call them to their feeder to come and eat. They'll be outside, and she'll have the sound that is unfamiliar to the rest of the nest. And she will cluck, and they will all come. Oh, that it worked that way in my home. But here's what happened the other night. I went out, and she's been nesting on the floor. We have an egg box, a nesting box higher up where they're supposed to lay their eggs, and they're not always obedient in that. But she had decided that it was time for her 7 chicks and herself to move off the floor. I don't know how it happened, but her and her 2-week-old chicks somehow made it 4 feet off the ground into that nesting box. Abby, help me out. I've got a picture here. Oh, look at that. Oh, I knew I'd get oohs and ahs with that. What amazes me in all of this is that she just knows what to do. There's goodness in this. No one showed her how to be a mama. No one told her when it was time to move higher up. No one explained to her about keeping chicks warm in the cool evenings or how to protect the vulnerable hatchlings from her vicious nestmates. She just knows. There's poetry in this. That's all. No more distractions. You see, there's goodness built into her very being. We've got to look for it, though. We need to look for goodness. I saw it also this week, and I've seen it the last few weeks. My little side garden beside my house has lettuce growing in it. What's amazing to me is I never planted the lettuce, but it has been some of the best lettuce we've had to date. Leaf lettuce. What happened last year was the lettuce that I put out there, it got hot and it got dry really fast, and I let it go to seed. And it bolted and it produced its seed. And then the sun dried out the plants died, the seed dropped, and this year at just the right time, I got lettuce, good lettuce, like some of the best lettuce I've grown, because I didn't grow it. There's goodness built into creation, isn't there? We've got to see it. And I know these are silly little illustrations, but I've got to tell you, this still takes my breath away. To see these moments where God's goodness shines through in all of these parts, even when all I see is brokenness around me. I think we have become so accustomed to goodness that we have forgotten what goodness looks like. We've grown used to it. All we see anymore is the brokenness of the world, the despair, the depravity, the aches in our bones, the finances that always bear down upon us, the weather that we love to talk about, how it's too hot, too dry, and then the moment it starts raining, we sing, rain, rain, go away, come again another day. We're not happy unless we're unhappy. And we pray. We pray, but our prayers oftentimes are little more than gripes about how God has failed in His goodness to our broken lives. To be sure, the world is broken. We're not denying that. We did that. We did that. So we're not ignoring it, but the brokenness of our finite little moments does not change the goodness of God or the goodness of what God has done. We've got to see this. If all we ever see is the brokenness, then we will never see God. God will always be that far-off deity who exists when I have troubles, when life hurts too much, or when I can't make sense of it at all. God will always be the distant vending machine that never works quite right and needs kicked a few times. Prayer, then, is first praise. I don't know what to pray about. Pray over the hens in your coop and look for the blessing of God in it. Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. Creation itself is a blessing. So prayer then is first praise. We have stopped praising God. We have lost all sense of wonder. We are an aweless people. We've lost all sense of wonder. We look for the supernatural in our midst, always frustrated when it doesn't go the way that it should. We want the supernatural healing, for God to touch our cancer-filled bodies, ignoring the miracle of chemotherapy. Or maybe the miracle that the blind see on a regular basis every morning when they put their glasses on. Or the miracle of the lame walking on prosthetics or replaced knees. This is miracle stuff, folks. We've grown so accustomed to the goodness that we think that the only way God works in our life is supernatural, and the natural is super. And God has built it in. Do you remember Jesus' words when they were talking about His signs and wonders? He says, you will do greater things than these. World, look around. Church, look around. We are doing great things. Why is it that it's not God if it comes on the end of a surgeon's scalpel? God is good all the time. And His goodness is there. We see it. Did you know the history of hospitals and universities is the history of the church? The hospitals you go to, I don't care what name they bear, were birthed. The idea and the reality of them were birthed in the care of the church, being the miracle of God in the world. We are doing great things, just as Jesus has said. Church, we need to be reminded of this. God is good. You're like, what's the point to this sermon? Here it is. God is good. God is good. What God has made is good, and what God intends is good. Can we step back and reclaim the awe of God speaking into nothingness? Of the nothingness even of our lives. The void of our lives, and even there creating light in the darkness, and even there declaring it good. We speak of God creating something out of nothing, everything out of nothing. What was it He created? Was it this material cosmos? Well, certainly, of course. Was it the animals with their near infinite variety? Yeah. I have questions about some of them, but that will have to come at a later date when Jesus and I are talking. What was it, the breath-giving moment when God's Spirit breathed into the clay of garden soil, the very essence of His being, and created humanity to bear His likeness into all of creation? Absolutely. And what a breathtaking thing that breathed-in moment was and continues to be. But The thing that defines what God creates is itself uncreated. You see, it is God's own goodness that defines all that we see. This is the something that ruptures the void of nothing. It is God's goodness. This is where our story begins. This is the proper place. We do not begin the story at the place of our brokenness. We've done that. We think our starting point is Genesis 3, with a serpent and a fruit and an expulsion from a garden. The starting point is God, and God is good. This is the proper place to start the story. When we begin the story at the point of brokenness, we will never know what it is we are being saved from, or more importantly, what we are being saved for. We must begin with God's goodness and the goodness of all that God does. Here again is the something out of nothing that defines all things in heaven and on earth and under the earth, both visible and invisible. Or as the poet apostle John the Younger wrote, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. All things were made through Him. All things were made through Him, and without Him was not anything made that was made. In Him was life, and the life was the light of the world. Now the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. We need a poet. So, even though this sermon is for me and for my soul, we still have to ask the question, so what? It's nice to wax poetic, but so what? Is this just another one of my eye-rolling flights into the ecstatic? Yeah, it is a little bit. But that is the question we often ask when we get caught up in the rapture of God's goodness is, so what? What does this mean for me? What does this mean for the nothingness of my life? The emptiness of my brokenness? You feel it? That void that needs spoken into, out of which nothing can come because nothing exists. What can we do in that emptiness? The answer comes to us as a promise and a proclamation. Here it is. God is still speaking into the emptiness, into the vacuum of our existence. The despair is real. The brokenness is felt from the sin that threatens to steal our lives, from the systems of power that seem to threaten the goodness of God Himself. We need that promise again, the promise that God speaks something good into the nothing of our brokenness. Did you know that every generation since Jesus arrived in the flesh of humanity has thought that theirs was the last generation? For over 2,000 years, every generation has thought that the wickedness of their generation was unique. Since the time of Jesus, every age has said that it is all coming to an end, that wickedness is spelling the doom of this moment and this generation like never before. We hear it echoed in the halls of our churches and in the rotundas of our capitals. We say things like, well, this election is the most important election that the world has ever faced. Aren't we awful proud of ourselves? Or we say things like, this brokenness in the world is as evil as it can be. God cannot tarry any longer. Oh, who do you think you are to tell God what He can and can't do? You see, every generation has thought this is it. And we tend then to devolve into the brokenness without seeing any of the goodness. Maybe we should consider Rome the context for the life and the ministry of Jesus. Rome was truly the greatest nation the world has ever seen. I know that we disagree with them in our 247 years when we stack our measurement up against the 2,000 years of Roman history. It was the greatest nation the world has ever seen, the greatest military power, the greatest economic power. And guess what? It fell. It fell. and it's gone, and we uncover its ruins. The world continued. It kept going. Indeed, even in its fall, and I think this is the testimony to the fall, even in its fall, the church grew. Praise God. And for us and for the world, if America's own faithfulness is the thing that defines the ultimate fulfillment of Christ, then we are without hope. God forbid. But take heart. God is God. And out of nothing, God works His own goodness in the ruins of our lives. This nation and your life will come and go. And generations will uncover the ruins of our desiccated corpses and the buried flags of our fathers and will tell our stories. But just as we look back at the rise and the fall of countless nations, kings, powers that be, and the governments that come and go, we are able to see that God is working good in all things for those who love Him, who have been called according to His purposes in Christ Jesus. You see, God speaks into nothingness, and God makes good out of chaos. God makes life out of dust. God makes Himself the love towards which all things will finally arrive. Did you know heaven is not your destination? Heaven is the journey. The destination is God. And this is where we live. This must give us confidence. This must give us hope. And it must give us peace in the midst of it. And this peace comes with an adage. It's going to be okay. It's all going to be okay. I'm not ignoring the brokenness. The story is too convoluted to do that. But what history shows and Jesus proves is that it's all going to be okay. There's a woman named Julian of Norwich. She was the first English-speaking woman novelist and a mystic. I like the mystics. I know it's not a word we use in our Protestant traditions much, but wow, I like the mystics. And in case you're missing some of the poetry of this sermon, I'm one of them. But she wrote a book called Revelations of Divine Love, where that speaks about this emptiness needing filled with the voice of God. So with the voice of a prophet, with the voice of a poet, here's what she writes in this line, this well-known, well-versed line. She says, all shall be well, all shall be well, all manner of things shall be well. We need to hear that, don't we? Or maybe in T.S. Eliot's own echo of Julian's revelation. Here's what he writes. We cannot revive old factions. We cannot restore old policies or follow an antique drum. These men and those who oppose them and those whom they opposed accept the constitution of silence. Do you need that interpreted? The constitution of silence? He's talking about death. All of it, they have accepted the constitution of silence and they are folded in a single party, the grave. But then this, whatever we inherit from the fortunate, we have taken from the defeated. What they had to leave us, a symbol perfected in death. And all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well, by the purification of the motive in the ground of our beseeching. So God comes to the hollowness of our lives, the emptiness that threatens our existence, the nothingness that wants to swallow us in the expanse of despair, and the hopelessness of sin's depravity. And when He comes to that deep nothing that we call our life, He breathes words that are the very word of God with the song of a poet. Let there be, and there was. We sang some of those words earlier. He gives life, He gives light, He breathes in our bodies. We're going to sing that song again because there needs to be a necessary response where all creation shouts His praise. So hear this in conclusion today. The invitation is given to hear again the poetry of life. There's poetry in life that calls us into the goodness that is God. The question is will you hear it? Will you listen? Will you rise from the dust of despair with the promise of goodness breathed into your lungs? Will you move from the perpetual freak-out of the present moment and into the eternal promise of God that when He looked at all He had made, He declared that it was very good? For those of you that have been listening carefully, this is salvation. This is salvation. This salvation is an invitation because it's life. The goodness of God is life. It is life, and that life always comes with an invitation to receive it with the breath of God in our lungs. Once again, it is life, it is breath, it is poetry breathed into your lungs and coursing through your veins. So rise from the dust, be made whole with the promise that in Christ all shall be well. All shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. Pray with me.